The day I walked out of that building for the last time, my manager shook my hand and said, "We'll really miss you." He meant it. That's the part that should have felt good. It didn't, because I already knew what was waiting for him on Monday morning, when he tried to run a project that only existed because of me. A project built from 18 months of my work, my evenings, my weekends, my expertise. And I had taken every single piece of it with me, legally, quietly, without a single word. But let me take you back, because before I walked out that door, Claire was celebrating. She had just been announced as senior project lead in front of the entire company. Standing at the front of that conference room, smiling, accepting congratulations, shaking hands with the very executives who had never once asked whose name was on the original documents. She looked at me once across that room. She didn't look away first. She thought she had taken everything. She hadn't taken the one thing that was going to matter. 18 months earlier, I had built something from nothing, a complete operational overhaul of the company's entire client onboarding process. Nobody asked me to. I saw a problem the company didn't know it had, and I knew how to fix it. I worked evenings, I worked weekends, not resentfully, willingly. The way you work when the thing you're building genuinely matters to you. My manager Richard had told me twice in formal performance reviews that I was on track for senior project lead. I wrote it down both times. I still have those notes. Claire sat 2 desks away from me. We were friendly in that easy, unguarded way coworkers sometimes are. People who share a space and assume, without examining it, that they are on the same side. She would ask questions about my project. I answered every one of them openly. Then, 4 months before the announcement, she took my framework, reformatted it, rephrased it, changed enough language to create surface distance, and submitted it directly to senior leadership under her own name. The timestamps on the shared drive told the full story to anyone willing to look. Richard was willing to look. He had access to everything. He chose not to. Not because he didn't see it, but because resolving it was harder than letting it go. That second layer, a manager with the power to act, making the quiet decision not to, that was the cut that went deeper than anything Claire did. At 6 weeks out, I sat in a quarterly review and heard Claire present the specific architecture of my own ideas back to the room. The particular sequence of logic I had spent 3 months refining. The skeleton of something that had lived, until very recently, only in documents with my name on them. She had changed the language, but the bones were identical. 2 weeks before the announcement, Richard pulled me aside, told me there had been some overlap between my work and Claire's submissions, that contributions were being assessed. He said it in the particular warm tone of someone who has already made a decision and wants you to feel okay about it before you find out what it is. I nodded. I thanked him. I walked back to my desk. And I sat there for 45 minutes, not working, just sitting with the suffocating realization that the environment you believed in was never as safe as you thought. That night I opened my sent folder at 11 o'clock. What I found was not ambiguous. I will not tell you I handled that night with composure. I sat on my kitchen floor and I cried. Genuinely, completely. The kind of crying that is not just about the thing that happened, but everything the thing represents. Every late night nobody acknowledged. Every time you delivered something exceptional and heard nothing. Every time you told yourself this place was different. But here is where my story stops following the script you might expect. Because by morning, something had shifted. Not to anger, to something colder and more useful than anger. I made one phone call that week that nobody in that building knew about. What I learned in that single conversation was something I hadn't known to look for. The methodology I had built, developed on personal time, on personal devices, documented in files predating any company assignment, it was still mine. The timestamps proved it, the paper trail proved it, and I had never signed anything that gave it away. I didn't make a scene. I didn't send a threatening letter. I didn't say a single word inside that building. I just knew, and I started building what came next. 2 quiet messages to contacts at firms I had long respected. Updated portfolio. Revised professional profiles. The invisible groundwork that made no sound at all. And then, the move that people always find strangest when I tell this story. I finished the project. Completely. Every process document, every implementation note, Every client communication template, polished, organized, handed to Richard in a shared folder with one line typed beneath it. Full handover materials. Everything needed for successful implementation. No tone, no italics, no pointed pause. I did not do that for them. I did it because I needed, not as performance, not to be witnessed. I needed my own private, permanent knowledge that I left nothing unfinished, that I walked out with every obligation met, that there was nothing they could rewrite about how I left. But here's the thing about a complete handover document with no institutional knowledge behind it. It looks like everything. It functions like a shell, because the logic that made the system actually work, the decision architecture, the client-specific adaptations, the reasons behind every structural choice, that never went into any document. That lived in my head, and I walked out with it. I handed in my notice 11 days after the announcement. Richard asked if I would consider a counteroffer. I told him, no performance in this, no crafted line, just the plain truth, that it was not about the money. He nodded slowly, the particular nod of someone who understands considerably more than they are saying. My last day was quiet. I cleared my desk, said goodbye to the people I genuinely meant it to, walked out on a Thursday afternoon, and I stood on the pavement outside that building for just a moment, not dramatically, and I felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. Not happiness, not victory, the particular sensation of having stopped carrying something that was never yours to carry in the first place. 3 weeks later, my new company found me through my updated profile. Better title, 40% better compensation. Within 90 days, they asked me, twice, where I had developed my client onboarding methodology. They wanted to present it to the full leadership team. They wanted to expand it globally. I presented it in a boardroom with 12 people in it. Meanwhile, back at my old company, the implementation had collapsed. Process gaps nobody could explain. Clients escalating. A framework that looked complete on paper and fell apart in execution. Because the person who designed the logic was gone, and the logic had gone with her. Then Richard called a contact of mine, carefully, indirectly, to ask whether I would consider coming back, not as an employee, but as a consultant, to fix what had broken, to explain the system to the person now holding the title that had been taken from me. The rate I quoted was more than my previous annual salary. He didn't call back. Claire holds the title of Senior Project Lead at a company still trying to understand why the system doesn't work. I hold the methodology, now formally documented, now contractually assigned, now being implemented across a global client base at a company that asked for my name on it from day one. I did not feel the satisfaction I expected when I heard about the collapse. What I felt was quieter and more complete. I felt nothing. Not the cold nothing of indifference, the warm nothing of someone who has moved far enough away that the old fire no longer reaches them. And there was a morning, an ordinary Tuesday, unremarkable in every way, when I woke up and they were not the first thought in my mind. Not the second either. They were simply gone. That morning, not the new role, not the 40%, not the boardroom, not the consulting rate Richard couldn't meet. That ordinary, unremarkable Tuesday morning. That was the win. That was the whole thing. I know some of you are carrying something like this right now. Not necessarily a promotion, not necessarily a colleague, but the specific weight of a place or a person that took something from you. And the question that won't leave you alone. What does it look like to walk away and never look back? I still don't have a clean answer. I just know how it ended for me. What would you have done? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one.